Welcome to the Horizon Awaits and our trip to the 4 national parks in southern Texas and New Mexico. First, we stopped at Big Bend National Park. Big Bend is a really large park in southern Texas, right on the Mexican border. It's quite large. You have to drive a long way to get through it. It's not one of the largest parks, but it certainly is isolated. As you're driving along, at least the time we went, there was hardly any cars on the road, and it was a long, desolate view in every direction. It's a very dry, like a desert environment with these large mountains with plateaus on top throughout it. We went down to the hot springs, and to get down there, you had to take this pretty treacherous road. It was very narrow with a pretty good drop off on one side. So I wouldn't want to take my camper down there. We got down there, we came across the Rio Grande River. Very small compared to what you'd expect for a Rio Grande. But it did see this nice oasis on the river. Very beautiful in the desert, and it was also the location of the hot springs we were looking for. So it's Karen in the hot springs. There was no one there but us, and so we both took a dip. This is my dad bod in the hot springs. We left the hot springs and went to the Rio Grande Overlook, which is a mountain you can kind of hike over. We had to go through this tunnel in the mountain to get there. It's pretty neat. We got to the trail, the sign on the trail, right underneath it we found a visitor. I don't know if you can see him there, so I'll point him out. That was a rattlesnake underneath the signs. Good thing we noticed that. That's a nice greeting. The hike up over the mountain was pretty steep. It wasn't too bad, but we took a hike up there. But when you got to the top, there was a really good view. The mountains in the distance there are actually Mexico, because we're right on the border. Actually, not too far from this point is the border of Mexico. After we hiked down the other side, we were in the canyons. There was a tall cliff on one side, and on the other side, between the two, was the Rio Grande River. So the cliff you see here is actually in Mexico. So you could easily just walk across there to get to Mexico. In fact, all along the trail, there's little arts and crafts and trinkets that the Mexicans hike across and put down with a honor basket to get people to buy them. After we left there, we went to the view window, which is like this V shape of the rocks that if you get there at sunrise or sunset, it's supposed to be really spectacular, but we weren't there at sunrise or sunset, but it was still a nice little trail. Once we left Big Bend, we started driving through to Texas, and it's a very isolated road just outside of Marfa. And the interesting thing is, right on the side of the road, we suddenly come across these giant billboards, literally from the movie Giant. This is a close-up of the view. It was put there by an artist about 2018, so that's kind of surprising. And then a little further down the same road, on the side of the road, is a Prada store. That's right, Prada, the high-end shoes and handbag manufacturer. It's not a real store, it's an art piece, but they do have the legitimate bags and shoes there. Our next stop was Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which is just across the border of New Mexico. This is one of the newer national parks, and truthfully, it's not that interesting compared to some of the existing national parks. It looks very similar to Big Bend as far as the landscape goes. There's, unless you're going to go hiking, there's very little to see there. I did get some nice views of the grounds. This tree is called an eagle's claw. This is a claret cup cactus. I'm not sure what it is, but they put these little signs up to let you know what the plants are. So this one's a stay on trail. That's a stay on trail. One of the interesting things is there is the ruins of a stagecoach stop that came through this area in about the 1850s. So this is the actual building that was left there. Other than that, it's just very similar to Big Bend. Our next stop was Carlsbad Caverns, a much more exciting national park. On the way in, on the road, you see some wildlife. We saw mountain goats and 2 baby mountain goats cross the road. We have to stop for them, and they came across in front of us and then scurried up the mountain waiting for to meet their parents. It was kind of an interesting sight. They really can climb those cliffs very well. Okay, we're ready to go in the cave. It's a 1.5 mile walk on what they call the nature trail to get to the base of the cave, or you can take the elevator down. This is a viewing stadium they have. Then during the summer season, tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of bats come out of the cave at sunset, and so people sit there to watch them all come flying out. This time of year, there was only some swallows coming out. But the entrance to the cave is the start of the switchback trail that takes you down 1.5 miles of fairly steep incline. This is the path going down into the beginning of the cave. Unfortunately, as we get down into the cave, it gets darker and darker, and my camera doesn't work so well in the very low light. So you can't get many pictures of it, but as I got down here, I took one last view up to the entrance we came up so you can see how far we are down already. But it is a long way into this cave. Some of the features in the cave are illuminated, so I was able to take one more video here, but you can see it's very washed out because my camera does not do well in low light. So what I did was I switched to my cell phone, which takes night photos using a night vision technology, and so they're much better looking. So what we'll have here is a series of photos when we get down to the bottom. At the bottom of the cave is a really large room. You can walk around and see all kind of features. So that was the end, and then you could take the elevator back up to the top. Finally, we stopped at White Sands National Park. It was a national monument, now it's a national park. The road in is on a hard pack, but it is just sand. So you could drive in, and we took the camper, but it's a very kind of a rough ride. There wasn't many people there, so we got choice parking and very few people around. It's amazing how much sand is every direction. I decided to go ahead and try to climb to the top of one of the sand dunes, up the actual front of the sand dune. My feet stick in pretty good, so it was a little bit of an effort, but after I got on my hands and knees, I made it to the top. Victory. From the top, you can see white sand as far as I could see in every direction. This is really amazing to see these sand dunes go on forever, and it's so white. People bring sleds and snowboards to try to go down the sand, but I thought I'd go on my butt.
Slide on my butt. All I'm doing is give myself a sand wedge.
That's good.
That's why people have those surfboards, they wax up.
Yeah.
Didn't get too much sand in my shorts, but look at this.
That's a lot of sand.
The sand at White Sands National Park is this really powdery sand, like finer than any beach sand I've ever seen. It's really nice. I mean, I'd like to go to a beach with sands like this. But there's no beach here, but there is the dunes.
So that's the end of our visit to the 4 national parks in southern Texas and New Mexico. Join us next time when we visit Joshua Tree and Death Valley. Thanks for watching.